everyone, welcome to Reach Higher Riverside, where we share all Reach Higher stories happening in the greatest county in the nation. My name is Priscilla Grijalva, and I work at the best high school in the world. Hi everyone, this month we have an interview with Bill DeBaun. He is the National College Attainment Network Director of Data and Evaluation. In his role, he researches and writes about college access and success programming that demonstrates significant results for students' college enrollment and graduation rates. His other activities include the creation, development, and maintenance of NCAN's Data and Evaluation Toolkit and the Form Your Future FAFSA Tracker. Today we're going to talk a lot about the FAFSA Tracker, and Bill also created a video that we posted on our Reach Higher Riverside YouTube channel if you would like to check it out and watch the step-by-step process on how to work the FAFSA Tracker website. Bill did a great job on this interview, and I'm so excited to share this with you guys. I hope you guys enjoy this interview. All right, hi everyone. I'm with Bill DeBaun. He's the Director of Data and Evaluation at the National College Attainment Network. Bill, can you tell us a little bit about your background and your role with NCAN?
Sure. Good morning, and thank you so much for having me here. I really appreciate it. It's a pleasure to be on the podcast. I've been with NCAN now for about 7 years, and if you don't know about NCAN, just a quick thumbnail sketch. We're a member organization based in Washington, D.C. We have about 500 members across the country. They are community-based partners, K-12 schools and districts, higher ed institutions, state agencies, really runs the gamut. But they're all united by really wanting to close equity gaps and to help students with low-income backgrounds, students of color, first-generation students get to and through college. So they're united in their mission, even though their organization's kind of different in how they do that work. My work at NCAN as a Director of Data and Evaluation really involves kind of connecting research and data on the one hand and best practice and kind of student-facing efforts on the other, and making sure that research is getting down to to advisors and to counselors and to districts and to schools, but then to also listen to those really important stakeholders who are working directly with students and hearing from them, what do they wish research was telling them about, right? So that we have kind of a two-way street where research informs practice and practice also feeds back into research.
And can you talk about the FAFSA Tracker and how that got started?
Sure. So our FAFSA Tracker is now in its fourth year. And if you haven't visited the tracker before, it's essentially a tool for tracking FAFSA completions for high school seniors at the national, state, city, district, or school levels. Where it got started is that we saw that federal student aid was releasing FAFSA completion data every week throughout the FAFSA cycle. And this data is really useful. It's released at the school level, and it tells you kind of the through the given week how many completions there are, how many submissions, and then how many submissions and completions there were on that date in the previous year. And so there's 50. There's a state file. There's a file for every single state, and each of those files has every school in the state, public and private, with that completion and submission data.
Yeah.
If that sounds a little bit complicated, it is, and it's hard to get kind of the big picture from those data. And so what we thought was, maybe we can take these, we can reshape them, we can join it all together, and then put it in a format so that people can really understand it and see, at any one of these levels that I talked about, how is FAFSA completion going for the current class of high school seniors? So we've done kind of multiple iterations of it so that we can, keep improving kind of the experience for users. And it's been really popular, honestly. It kind of surprisingly popular. We were surprised at how quickly it took off. I think we're going to touch on this in a minute or so, but I think one of the things that makes people excited about it is it kind of almost spurs a friendly competition between states. I get states who email me and they're like, I'm looking at our ranking and I think that we should be higher in the ranking. Like they're like looking at it, they're like they're they're like, I feel like I should be like up to 24th. I'm sitting at 29th right now. Like I don't know, like can you double check your numbers? Or sometimes people want to talk about like which denominators we're using for some of the calculations. So it's just interesting that people are kind of using this as a friendly competition between states because they really do want to try to get up to the top 10, the top 5.
It is very competitive. And what is the website if people want to look it up?
Sure. You can find it at Form Your Future, FORMYOURFUTURE.org, and then just click on FAFSA Tracker from there.
And you're talking about the popularity. So why do you think it's so popular with policymakers?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think part of it is that I think there's a couple of different reasons. One is the friendly competition factor that I just touched on, right? I think policymakers are also kind of interested in that side. I think the other piece is that there aren't, at the national, a lot of states have kind of their own FAFSA tracking websites, right, where they're tracking just data for their state. There aren't a lot of sources of data on FAFSA completion that are at the national level. And our FAFSA tracker is kind of like, is nearly real time, right? Like, I mean, we update it every week from October to June, and then every 2 weeks over the summer. So you're always getting kind of new data to look at every week. We can cut it by kind of Title I eligible schools. We can look at it by like geography. We can look at it kind of cycle over cycle. So there's like a couple of different cuts that we can see. And I think probably the third reason is that FAFSA is just so important, right? I mean, it's really important as a signal of students' post-secondary intentions, right? We know that there's a really strong association between FAFSA completion and then immediate college enrollment for high school students. And, as a leading indicator for like what post-secondary enrollment might look like in the following fall, having these data and seeing what the trend of the cycle looks like, in nearly real time is kind of a valuable asset for policymakers.
Yeah, that's so true. Can you talk about the FAFSA landing page?
Sure. So we look at basically 2 key measures on FAFSA completion using the FAFSA tracker. We estimate the percent of seniors who have completed a FAFSA, and then you can look at that for national and the state level.
Okay.
And then we also look at kind of year over year percent change in FAFSA completions. So what we're trying to see here with these 2 measures is at the top here is like how well are we doing absolutely over the course of the cycle, right? In terms of the percentage of seniors completing a FAFSA. Obviously, we would love to get to 100%. Normally, we wind up a little over 60% nationally. And then the year over year percent change in FAFSA completion just gives us a relative sense of how we're doing compared to last year. Unfortunately, right now, as the time we're recording, we're 3 weeks into the FAFSA cycle right now, and we're down 14% compared to last year. So that's really worrying, right? And having those data kind of is a good early warning system. The further you scroll down the page, we start breaking out some of these data by selected school characteristics. So, for example, by Title I eligibility, by the percentage of students of color in high schools, by the geographic locale, so whether the high school is located in a city or a suburb or a town. And then you get further down and you get to the kind of the friendly competition part of this, right, where we show you the top 5 states by each of these measures, and then we show you the full ranking underneath that.
I know being virtual in California, or at least in Riverside County, we're currently shut down for our schools. We're just virtual right now. So it's been a little bit harder to reach students. And maybe, I know school counselors understand this too, but when we were at school physically, we could just hold like large workshops and help students, a ton of students all at once. and now it's like one by one virtually. Even doing breakout rooms does take a while, and it's a lot on us, but we're trying our best to help the students. So that I know, looking at that data, it is worrisome. And what about the class of 2020? Did that decline as well?
It did, unfortunately. The class of 2020 declined about 4% compared to the class of 2019, which is about 100,000 fewer students completing the FAFSA nationally. And if you look at obviously podcasts are not a good visual medium, but if you go to look at the FAFSA Tracker from last year, kind of the trend from last year shows predictably a really sharp decline in March and April, right? I mean, the FAFSA cycle was kind of chugging along. It was doing pretty well, beginning of March, and then once March 13th, which is the Friday where schools started closing across the country, or started going virtually across the country, you just see this really precipitous drop, and the FAFSA completion rate really never bounced back last cycle for the class of 2020.
Yeah, we were fortunate at our site. We got a lot of our FAFSAs done and our California Dream Acts done with our students before shutdown. We were like at 80% before we shut down. And then when June 30th hit, we hit almost 90%. But
that's incredible.
It was good, but then the college enrollment data dropped huge. So I know, like in our community, a lot of it was access to resources like internet, computers. By the time that all came, it was this semester starting the school year, and then also, people being afraid to leave because of what's going on in the world. But I know your FAFSA tracker does great completion rates. But my question for you is, does it also track the California Dream Act? Because I know the federal data doesn't. Does that track it for the state of California?
Unfortunately, it doesn't. So all of the data that we are using comes from federal student aid. And so if it's not included in the federal student aid data, then I'm not getting it. I haven't looked at the data availability for California about whether I could link that in or not, but it's certainly something that I could explore. Or if I could get my hands on the data, getting my hands on the data is always the most important step, right? I mean, as long as we have the data set, we can transform it into pretty much anything. So that is something that I would certainly be willing to explore, because it's a really critical topic, and California is not the only state that has financial aid completion data that isn't being recorded by the federal government either. So, like Texas has the TASFA, for example.
Yeah, that'd be great if you could include it. Have you thought about a financial aid race to completion, not submission, national championship? Maybe something by state and by school, and maybe having two different categories. One category for the schools with it as a grad requirement can be a national champion, and then another category for schools who do not have it as a graduation requirement. It would be great to have two different categories for equity for schools that have no control in getting it as a graduation requirement. It would even the playing field. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a really interesting concept. Obviously, we've talked already about the tracker being a friendly competition, and what you're talking about would really kind of formalize that. I think it would spur some FAFSA completion for sure. There aren't a ton of states right now that have FAFSA as a graduation requirement, although more and more are considering it. It's becoming a kind of a popular policy move, and I don't know. I know there are individual districts and schools that do require FAFSA for high school graduation. I don't have a good sense of where all of those are across the country, but it's something we could look at. Your question though about kind of spurring competition is really interesting, and it's something that NCAN has done before, but not at the kind of the state level. We've run twice now something called the FAFSA Completion Challenge, where we have challenged basically U.S. cities to increase their FAFSA completion, and had a competition there. And that project was funded in 2018 and 19 by the Kresge Foundation and SMBM Education Group, and then in 2016 and 17 by Kresge. And that kind of city level competition was super interesting, and it spurred a lot of different kind of community-wide approaches to FAFSA completion that we still recommend.
Yeah.
Like Mesa, Arizona just won the one in 2018 and 19, and they set up a really interesting kind of community-wide triaging system, right? Where they started out like very broadly at the top, doing kind of community-wide events, like broad-based events, and then into smaller groups, right? For students who still hadn't completed, and then for students who still didn't complete after that, doing kind of one-on-one targeted advising. And that seems like an approach that is replicable elsewhere.
Yeah.
And it's just a strategy that kind of having this competition and spurring innovation in FAFSA completion kind of brought to the forefront.
Yeah, that would be great if you could look into that because, I was watching the NBA championship and the World Series, and I thought, why not have a national championship for FAFSA? And I know, like in the state of California, we have that competition for, it's called Race to Submit, but a Race to Completion would be awesome. I know in the categories that they have for the Race to Submit, they have by different levels, but the category that certain schools are in, if you're in a category with a school district that has it as a graduation requirement, the other schools probably don't have a chance if they don't have it as a grad requirement. So it would be evening the playing field if you had both categories. And hopefully that does happen everywhere where we do eventually have it as a graduation requirement, but it really would spur some competition across the whole nation, just showing everyone like, hey, you could be national champs, like the World Series or the NBA champions.
And I think it raises awareness about FAFSA in general too, which is great. Like a byproduct of exactly what you're talking about. That kind of competition is, the more people are talking about a competition like that, the more people are also finding out just about FAFSA completion in general, which is a really positive byproduct.
Yeah, I'm a big sports fan, as you can tell, and I love competition. So, but I also love helping our kids with financial aid. I'm very passionate about that. I've always been my whole life. I know it really helps kids go on for more education or training, especially me being a first-generation college student and seeing how it impacts so many lives as students go on for more education or training.
It's absolutely critical. So thank you for the work that you're doing.
Thank you. Is there anything else you would like our listeners to know?
Yes, actually. So NCAN, in addition to the FAFSA completion work, we've been doing some other work on getting resources out into the field. And so we've got a really, really great 15-month K-12 college and career readiness calendar that we released in September that your listeners might be interested in. So we know that there's a lot of steps across the academic year to help students kind of get prepared to make a post-secondary transition. And so what we've tried to do at NCAN is put all of those steps from summer, from like summer, like through the academic year, and then the following summer into one, easy to use document. And we break it out into categories like post-secondary advising and financial aid and early awareness, and then connect each of the steps with kind of the best resources that we know about for actually working on those things. So it's a free resource from our website. It's at ncan.org. And we're really hopeful that by kind of putting all of the steps for college career readiness in the same place, that we can kind of generate some conversations in districts and in schools and in school counseling teams to think about, what steps are we taking now? What are some resources maybe we hadn't thought about before? And ultimately, how can we, better support students to make a great post-secondary transition?
Yeah, and I appreciate you giving me time today, Bill. At the end of our podcast, we like to do the Sunshine Spotlight. Can you tell our listeners at least one thing that's made you happy this week?
Yeah, sure. So my son is, I have a 3-year-old son, and he is, he's not normally like outside, like after sunset, because like kids go to bed early.
Yeah.
But the other day we were walking home, and there's a house in our neighborhood that has kind of like a big fake spider web out front. It's got like a big spider, and like it's got like this purple light that's like shining up on the house. And my son looks at my wife and he goes, "Oh, that's very spooky." So it was just very funny that he's like, "Oh, it's very spooky out here." And then this morning he told me our house is just a little spooky. So he's
that's so
doing it
cute.
for Halloween.
That's exciting. I'm glad that he got to see that. I guess for me, my Sunshine Spotlight honestly was getting to meet you and talk to you. I love your work and I appreciate all that you're doing across the nation. So thank you again for your time today. If you could just say goodbye to all our listeners.
Yes, thank you. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Priscilla, for having me. I really enjoyed our conversation. And to all listeners, thank you for tuning in and for caring about FAFSA completion. Please reach out anytime if I can ever be helpful to you about FAFSA completion or anything else related to NCAN's work. It's been a real pleasure to speak with you this morning.
All right, bye everyone. Thank you for tuning in to Reach Higher Riverside. You can follow us on Twitter at RH Riverside. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel at Reach Higher Riverside. You can also subscribe to our iTunes or Google Play Music and give us a rating. Thank you so much for listening in. We appreciate all of you tuning in. And as Michelle Obama would say, when they go low, we reach higher.